computer. Part 2 of our talk on electoral integrity and gender, and whether or not we can have corruption-free elections in 2023. I want to once again ask those questions that I asked earlier, but I'm going to give lengthier answers that maybe help to shed more light on these important issues. So first, what is the relationship between gender, elections integrity, and accountability in Nigeria? As I said previously, it's complicated. Electoral integrity requires commitment by everybody concerned to respect democratic principles. And it also requires working towards actualizing a representative system of government through free, fair, and reliable elections. Democratic principles, including transparency and accountability, must be evident. Election administration must work efficiently and accurately. Electoral behavior by all participants must be ethical, and integrity monitoring systems must function well all through the electoral process. This is according to election administration, participation, monitoring, and enforcement principles tied to elections in a study done by ACE in 1998. So we must also have strong institutional frameworks and legal frameworks. So until all women entering the political arena do not experience widespread violence, and when legal frameworks lose their gender blindness, when formal and political education is available to all, and also political parties have internal democracy and they stop excluding, sidelining, and marginalizing women. And until the media stops gender-biased coverage of the electoral process, and when campaign funding is available to all in a manner that enables them to meet their legal and ethical obligations, we should take an aluta continua stance. This is because patriarchy and its legitimation of male dominance in the public and political sphere is the natural consequence of the normalization of those aspects of our culture that prevent and or restrict women from exercising power. So we need to realize that tokenism and symbolic roles in decision-making does not really give actual power to women. And we need to strive for parity in our political system. So until men are not considered as deserving of the dominant positions and roles in politics, and until they are not automatically granted, quote, the moral authority, the social privilege, and control over property, and until they are not the only ones who are holding power over majority of decisions in life, while women are excluded from the decision-making process and relegated to caregiving roles, aluta continua, many rivers to cross. We have structural violence in Nigeria, as I said before, when it comes to gender equity, because the marginalization of women in politics is made to seem inevitable and cultural. And it is so normalized that when it is not observed, one is surprised. Nigerian women are, as Professor Bola Akonji said in 2019, and I said before, Nigerian women are in a Stockholm Syndrome situation in our country. We're marginalized. Some of us are brutalized and subjected to physical, psychological, sexual, and economic violence, as well as culturally derived violence that prevents us from exercising our full rights of citizenship by participating in the political system as full equals of men. We have taken the situation in stride, of course, and given our experiences, some of us believe that other women are worse enemies than men. We don't fully understand the ways in which a system can use incentives and disincentives to either encourage compliant behavior or discourage challenges to the status quo when we do this. If a marginalized person wants to move faster up the hierarchy in a system, being seen as obedient to the system dynamics and integrating the system's norms and values and principles and accepted behavior into one's life yields benefits. Others who are similarly oppressed, on whom one visits the disciplinary restrictions and injunctions validated by said system, would blame the person whom they see as one of them rather than the powers that be or the system itself, because the person that is, quote unquote, one of them is expected to be sympathetic and is believed to be willing to work in solidarity with them instead of against them. The state has constitutional and international obligations towards women that require the state to provide and affirm and enhance women's political, economic, and social rights. But the state is woefully underperforming. As long as women fight one another and ignore the structural constraints from the system and its institutions, nothing much can be accomplished. My second question, are corruption-free elections possible in Nigeria? My answer, yes, but it would take a lot of work by a critical mass of Nigerians. So let's look at corruption in Nigerian elections in brief. This is a great time to speak on this subject. I was busy writing this paper when the program Patito's Gang came on the TV with a focus on, quote, corruption in Nigerian politics. This was on Channels TV, October 22, 2022. In addition, the pervasiveness of corruption in Nigeria is so strong that a simple Google search produced 15 million results in 0.59 seconds on October 22, 2022. It is thus well documented that Nigerian elections are bastions of corruption. Vote buying, inducement, manipulation of card readers, and abuse of power by the incumbents are characteristic features in Nigerian elections. And voters' perceptions are that the problems are all getting worse, according to CDD in 2020. The media, scholars, election monitors, and analysts all confirm this phenomenon of election corruption being pervasive, with data and extensive documentation. Given the heightened insecurity and dissension in the country, the persistence of ethno-religious and sectarian violence, as well as politicians' proclivity for using violence to intimidate opponents and settle political scores, combined with increasing youth unemployment and underemployment. There are fears that the 2023 elections would be marred by violence and fractious politics. Freedom House categorizes Nigeria as partly free, with an overall score of 43 out of 100. In terms of political rights, Freedom House gives Nigeria 20 out of 40 points. In terms of civil liberties, it gives Nigeria 23 out of 60 points in 2022. And in 2021, 45 out of 100 for political rights. And so we can see that the country has worsened in the Freedom Index. For the 2011, 2015, and 2019 elections, the Fund for Peace, in its Fragile States Index, ranked Nigeria below the 15th position out of 179 countries. For 2022, Nigeria is ranked 16th, and it is categorized as worsening. So election integrity is a fundamental expectation in a democracy. It is about the presumed incorruptibility of the process, which leads to the expectation that elections will be free and fair. Electoral integrity is also about the commitment of all involved to following the rules in an ethical manner. It is about the willingness of everybody involved to concede to the winner if one loses, even in a hotly contested and contentious election. Since it's clear that Nigerian elections do not meet these conditions, having corruption-free elections is a dream deferred. Elections in Nigeria have been hallmarks of a do-or-die approach to politics. There are bitter controversies. There are violent conflicts that sometimes cause fatalities. Remember that I also include the erection of formidable barriers in the way of women in the indicators of a corrupt election system. Now, I also have said, and I repeat, structural violence is built into Nigeria's political, economic, and social systems. Structural violence is a situation where the system has made exclusion, marginalization, and abuse so routine and banal that it is so much a part of everyday life, and the victims and survivors of the violence are seen to deserve the injustices that they experience, or the inequality is considered to be normal and unchangeable. The problems are evident throughout Nigeria's electoral cycle, from something like women being denied positions of real authority in the party's power structure. For example, let's just think roughly, how many women are in powerful positions within our political parties? We also have few opportunities available to women to be candidates, and women have been denied voice in our political system. Women leaders are now part of our political parties, but they too can be marginalized and treated as tokens. For example, the PDP women national leader, Professor Stella Efa Atto, recently complained of being prevented from playing her role in campaign rallies in Uyo and Kaduna. She was not called upon to address the rallies, where another woman, Senator Uche Kunife in Uyo, was called to address the rally. It took the intervention of Iyom Josephine Aneni to get the party to allow her to speak in Uyo. In Kaduna, the party's youth leader, beside whom she was seated, and Dr. Baraka Sani, who's director of the PDP support groups in the campaign council, both of them were asked to address the crowd on behalf of the PDP women. 3 quick observations on this. The message being sent when such situations arise are: 1, women are seen as interchangeable. 2, it is also believed that as long as you include a woman, you have demonstrated that you are gender sensitive. Further, it is believed that women have more important things, that men have more important things to say and should naturally be given priority over women. Complaining and insisting on being heard may not convince the male dominant establishment to listen and change their behavior. However, women with power and confidence, in this case, Iyom Josephine Aneni, can advocate for other women and insist on their rights being respected. As if being muzzled was not bad enough, women are also sometimes compelled to step down for male candidates, even after winning primaries. This we see documented in many cases, but one that I would like to reference is Professor Paramalam's study in 2015. And then NDI also did a 2016 study where this is documented. In addition, there are cases where women are subjected to physical and sexual abuse. There are well-documented cases of attempted assassination, rape, and beatings of women during elections. Who can forget the case of Mrs. Salome Abu, the PDP woman leader in Kogi State, who was burned to death on November 18, 2019, in her house in the aftermath of the state's gubernatorial election. Okay. And there are many other cases. Now, it's the third question. What would it take to have elections integrity in Nigeria? It would take comprehensive and fundamental social, political, and economic transformation. Genuine commitment to inclusive democracy is also required. Democracy is about freedom, as I've said before. And we have to have as a mantra the first words of the song, of Ella's song, sung by Sweet Honey in the Rock. We who believe in freedom shall not rest until it comes. Therefore, again, I'm repeating myself, a luta continua, Victoria, etc. must be our mantra. That is, the struggle continues, but victory is certain. It would take the involvement and consistent, tenacious, and relentless struggle of all key stakeholders, which includes all the usual suspects, especially the citizens of Nigeria, demanding accountability in the administration and management of our elections to have electoral integrity. Who are the usual suspects? The election management bodies, the non-governmental organizations, the local and international election monitors, women's rights organizations, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and so forth, all have to be involved. And using the rights-based approach, we know that all human beings have the right to freedom, equality, and dignity. This covers social, economic, cultural, civil, and political spheres. These rights were produced in many democracies through popular struggles that led to the evolution of institutions that we now see as normal fixtures. There is no freedom without struggle. Again, Frederick Douglass citing. In most of the world, full gender equality is yet to be achieved. And we see the importance of these rights, both in the historical and contemporary emphasis on gender equality in conventions and declarations globally, as well as regionally, and in constitutions locally. The Sustainable Development Goals are the most recent affirmation of the importance of gender equality. Civil rights to freely participate in politics and in the public sphere include the right to run for elections and to vote, and the right to participate freely in public discourse, the right to peacefully assemble and protest, to form and join organizations. The Nigerian Constitution guarantees these rights, but the de jure rights have not produced de facto access to those rights for majority of Nigerian women who are denied the ability to fully participate in politics. This means there must be relentless struggle to close the gap between formal guarantees of rights and the actual experience thereof. The problem we face in Nigeria should be understood within the global context. Women remain marginalized in politics because they're still restricted from exercising political power in a manner that is commensurate with their numbers in human population. So this dismal statistic, quote, only 6.6% of heads of state and 5.2% of heads of government and 24.3% of parliamentarians are women. We also do not have full statistics on the percentage of women elected to local government worldwide. The World Bank scores Nigeria 3 out of 6 on gender equality in its 2022 Africa Country Policy and Institutional Assessment report. The World Economic Forum's Gender Index says that in Nigeria, we don't yet have the privilege of having a female head of state. We have a conundrum where women are said to have political rights in Nigeria, but they are prevented from having decision-making power. And this means that their access to the rights that are constitutionally guaranteed are limited. Luckily, we have strong legal frameworks internationally, regionally, and in country, but there's a need for improvement. The international frameworks include the 1979 Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW. CEDAW was historic in affirming women's human and political rights. The fourth conference on women in Beijing, the fourth UN World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995, further affirmed strong global resolve to achieve gender equality and to ensure, to quote, ensure the full implementation of the human rights of women and of the girl child. The Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action established the target of gender balance in decision-making and recognized that women's empowerment and their full participation on the basis of equality in all spheres of society, including participation in the decision-making process and access to power, are fundamental for the achievement of equality, development, and peace, end quote. The situation is not all grim, but it is notable that women are still underrepresented in decision-making positions, although there are gains in some countries' experiences. When the numbers of women in parliaments and decision-making institutions increase, it is called, there tends to be substantive representation. And we need a critical mass of women in power because women's interests and claims are included in laws and policies adopted by legislatures when there's an increase in their numbers. With a critical mass, women's voices tend to be heard better. Even without the critical mass, it is said that critical acts can influence politics to amplify women's voice and influence in the political system. This is the essence of substantive representation. So we need both descriptive or numeric representation when the numbers of women increase, and we need substantive representation when their representation produces changes in laws and extension in rights to women. Our focus should not only be on women being present in decision-making institutions. Participation can also be in terms of women's ability to exercise their rights to vote, to run for office, to become elected, to administer electoral systems, to observe elections, and to represent civil society in all stages of the electoral process. A holistic approach to women's political participation should prioritize the drive for gender equality and women's empowerment in all stages of the electoral cycle, comprising the pre-electoral, the electoral, and the post-electoral periods. All throughout the process, the engagement of various stakeholders, from electoral management bodies to political parties, to the media, to civil society, must be evident. Nigeria is one of the approximately 75 countries that have criminalized same-sex relations, which contributes to the escalation of discrimination and targeting of the LGBTQI community. Despite our reluctance to fully embrace this community, as long as we say we are democratic, they too must be able to exercise their right to fully participate. And election monitoring bodies should promote, quote, the political inclusion of these communities based on the conviction that inclusive electoral processes require the participation of all citizens, as well as the respect of their human rights, end quote. This way, we can show in Nigeria that we are leaving no one behind. Let me also ask, is Nigeria a signatory to the following? 1, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 2, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. 3, the African Women's Charter. 4, Beijing Plan of Action. 5, Sustainable Development Goals. 6, African Union Agenda 2063, and many others too numerous to recount. If we are signatories, to what extent are all these international obligations and regional domesticated in Nigerian law? To what extent are they known to the rights bearers, the citizens of Nigeria? To what extent are the constituent rights available to all Nigerian women and citizens in a manner that transcends their de jure existence to the de facto impact on women's daily lives? Let's ponder on this. The fourth question, again, can corruption-free elections be achieved as early as the 2023 elections? Except there's a miracle, not a chance. But we should continue the struggle. The challenges are too many. The rut is too deep. And again, to repeat what Frederick Douglass famously said, that I've said previously, quote, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. Find out just what a people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. In democracies, we should demand our rights. We should be clear that we will not submit to oppression. We should resist oppression and marginalization with words and peaceful action. But we have to take a long-term scenario. We have to be tenacious, we have to be relentless, and we have to be tireless in pursuit of justice, full equality, and the respect of all of our rights. This is what would make us a great nation. Okay, so this is the end of part 2, and part 3 will follow.